A quick intro round. Ryan being the mastermind behind this webinar and the reason why we're here. And this is organized and people are showing up for it. So Ryan, give a quick intro on who you are and what role you play in this, and then we'll move on for the intros to Alex and then Erin before I wrap it up.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm Ryan Robinson. I work on the Close.io team doing marketing. I put together these webinars with these beautiful people you see here today. It's a lot of fun and we're pumped to dig in. So over to you guys.
Alex, want to do a quick intro?
Sure. I'm Alex Berman. I run a company called Experiment 27. Mostly we focus on lead gen for digital agencies. I used to be the director of marketing at an agency that hit the Inc. 5000 3 times in a row. Oversaw the growth as director of marketing from about 40 employees up to we're at about 90 employees now at that agency. And then this current company I'm the chairman of, and we're about 20 people now.
Right on. And just to fill some little details in, Alex, if you have not seen his excellent cold email teardowns on YouTube, after the webinar, you might want to check it out. He's done some really, really amazing stuff, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. And now, the one and only, the legend, the myth.
Steli Efti. Yeah.
Nice. No.
Yeah.
Mr. Predictable Revenue, Erin Ross. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yep. Well, I wrote this book called Predictable Revenue. And then, so worked at Salesforce, wrote Predictable Revenue. I live in Los Angeles, which I can see right from home. I'm a lone wolf here in LA because the whole team is based in Vancouver. I like to say I actually couldn't use an office if I had one here because I only have like an hour or two at a time in chunks because between then, fun fact, I've got 9 kids. So between like getting people ready in the morning, school, watch the kids for my wife, this, that, I wouldn't be able to go to an office because I'd drive there and have to turn right back around, do something, some trip, right? Wrote actually a sequel to Predictable Revenue, if you didn't know, came out a year ago-ish or so, called From Impossible to Inevitable with Jason Lemkin of SaaStr from impossible.com, right? And actually people have said it's a better book, great book. And I've always been a fan of Steli Efti, so I'm glad to be here. In fact, you had a little a section in the From Impossible book, Steli. So thank you for that.
That is very true. Well, thank you right back. And for those of you who don't know, we're just chatting and saying that Erin has the first, what I would call a unicorn family. Like the growth of his like businesses and brands has been impressive, but the growth of his family for somebody that has 2 kids myself is just like anytime I ever want to complain about how hard it is to have children, I think about you, Erin.
Exactly. Exactly. There's always someone who has whatever you want to complain about. Someone else has it harder. So
there's always somebody to look up to if you just find the right standards to set.
Yeah, or down to.
Down to.
But yeah, 0 to 9 kids in 7 years or so. Plus, there's some others we fostered, but there's just 9 legal children at this point.
Tells you a lot about how big the heart of Erin Ross is. It really is incredible. Super inspiring to see all the amazing things that you guys have done with your family. All right, so just let's wrap this up with me, and then let's dive right into what you guys want to see. For everybody who has joined the webinar so far, using the chat to communicate is a lot of fun, but at the end of this, we're going to do a pretty extensive Q&A session. We really don't want to just guess what you want to hear, but we really want to answer the questions you have, the challenges you have, your problems you have, if we can, or at least give it a good try. So there's a little Q&A button. If you have questions, please just click that button and write in the question. At the end of the webinar, we'll go through them and answer them one by one. If you put your questions in chat, they're going to disappear. It's going to be impossible for us to resurface them and address them. So please use the Q&A button throughout the webinar to write down any kind of question that you have. All right, with that being said, my name is Steli Efti. I have a pretty average family, so we haven't gotten the unicorn standard yet. But who knows? There's still time. 2 little baby boys right now actually in Germany. So this is kind of where most of the folks in the webinar, I would assume, are in the US right now, LA, and Ryan. I'm not even sure where you are right now. But I'm in Germany currently. I'm going to be back in the US next week. And, I've been running a company called Close.io. It's an inside sales CRM that helps small and medium-sized businesses around the world close more deals, make more revenue, communicate more effectively. So when it comes to cold emails and cold calls and sales, a very near and dear topic to my heart. And there's something that both Erin, Alex, and myself have taught a lot. So why not bring the crew and the gang together and see if we can, share some current and up-to-date insights with all of you when it comes to closing bigger deals. All right. So with that being said, let's kickstart, the first question that I want to really put out there, which is that, over the last few years, Erin, you really started this sharing more content with the world on how to do sales more effectively. The Cold Call 2.0 framework of predictable revenue was really one of the first ones, especially in the startup world, that was attempting to teach startups how to do sales better. And was thinking, hey, let's not just do all this activity-based stuff to get to big companies, but let's think of smarter ways to reach the right decision makers, especially in large organizations, and to drive revenue in some kind of in a thoughtful and mindful way. Now, since you started teaching some of your tactics, more people have popped up, people like Alex and myself, sharing their knowledge and sharing some of your knowledge and your books and your stuff. So, I remember just in the past 5, 6, 7 years, the amount of content, the amount of templates and strategies for new companies to do sales and to grow their sales numbers and to do, cold sales and outbound sales has gone up dramatically. Yeah, it's exploded. It's like there's content everywhere. Exactly. And I'm sure that you two guys, just like you get these templates that we have taught years ago in your inbox of lots and lots of companies.
I know this one.
I've shared this. I taught this framework, and now I'm getting this every day in my inbox, people trying to reach me or sell me something. So what I want to start with is, let's talk about today. If you think about the ways that startups, small and medium-sized businesses, can do outbound sales today, the tactics that work right now, the things that you think will continue to work, not just for the next week or two, but will work probably for a really long time. What are some of the kind of timeless pieces of advice that you've seen time and time again, and you seeing companies today use and work really effectively? Let's start with you, Erin. What are some of the things that you would share today with a startup in terms of selling and setting up outbound sales in a successful way?
Yep. Well, so what's interesting, there was a big missing piece to predictable revenue. So it came out 2011, and working with companies over a bunch of years, because that's how I support the family, is consulting with companies on how to build prospecting teams. But I realized too, at some point there's a missing piece, and that piece became the first section of the From Impossible book. So that piece is the section is called Nail and Niche. It's a free. Actually, you can get the free chapter on FromImpossible.com. But essentially, what I saw was some companies would do outbound and it would just work, and a lot of companies would try it and it wouldn't work, or it was very challenging. Okay, what was the difference? There could be lots of reasons for that. Or let me actually step back. A lot of companies would do things and they would grow, whether inbound, outbound, all around. And some companies would do, whether it was outbound or online marketing, whatever they tried, and they would struggle. Well, not just prospecting, but most importantly, when companies hadn't nailed the niche, what that meant was they didn't know really, okay, yeah, everyone could use my stuff, right? So if I was, especially if I was a company that could help lots of kinds of companies, like a forums company or an IT services company or some kind of platform company, I can help anyone could use it, right? But that actually creates an opportunity because everyone can use it. The problem is everyone can use it. So who needs it the most? They're like finding a bit like a needle in a haystack, and really narrowing in on what kind of customer needs you the most, and what do they care about? Right? You have this great network scalable architecture. That doesn't mean jack to the buyer. So it's not only knowing specifically the best kind of customer who needs you and will pay you the most money, but also what language do they think about? What do they use in their terms? So when you are building a list, you're focusing on a list where you actually have a chance of succeeding. Because the biggest waste of time and energy in outbound is targeting the wrong companies and the wrong people, bottom line. And once you have the right, at least some kind of decent list, when you are reaching out over phone or email or social or carrier pigeon, you're communicating with them in a way that makes sense to them. It's not blather. So that, I think, fundamentally is something that will always be a challenge for companies. And it's something you need to keep your eye on, because even companies like Oracle and SAP have the same problem. It just comes out a bit differently. Their problem is, I'm a salesperson. I've got 20 products I can sell. It's the same problem around, like, where is the spot where you're going to focus, where you can have the highest chance of making money? And that's a discipline that is hard for startups. And it's hard partly because they may not want to do it. It can be hard because it can be hard. Sometimes it's hard to nail it down. It can take years or months. You don't always know, but that nail a niche is the fundamental. If you don't do that, you're just not going to be ready to grow, period.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more with it. And it's one of those pieces of advice that's timeless, right?
It doesn't matter. The same advice in 3 years or 6 years.
Yeah. It doesn't matter when. If you don't understand who your ideal customer is, if your understanding is fuzzy, which means broad, it's always going to be hard for you to nail the message, to nail the approach, versus a competitor that has a much clearer, much more specific idea of their customer, right?
Okay, here's one tactic. Here's one way you can, if this, obviously you should get the chapter and read it, but one of the things we see people not doing enough of is just interviews. Even you do 2 or 3 interviews with a customer anyone you can really talk to. Like, prospects are harder if you talk to them. Customers, to start, for a couple of reasons. One, what you're looking for is, hey, is this, a need or a nice to have? You as a company are not a need to have, and you as a company are not a nice to have. It's to what kinds of customers are you a need, and when are you a nice? Because people don't buy nice. Here's how you know you're a nice. People show up, you should do the demo. They're like, that's so cool. And they don't buy. You're nice to have. So that's one area. The other things you're looking for are very specific kinds of keywords or key phrases or language they're using, that insider language. I'll give you an example. There's a company, a customer we have who they sell to hospital, like the financial departments of hospitals. And they, the term that they, after talking to some customers, they came up with this term, basically, who's in charge of patient cash. It's not who does billing or who does this, it's who does patient cash. Or wherever they use it. And that actually ended up being a really powerful key phrase that just cut through the clutter and doesn't sound generic. It's like insider language, and really worked for them. And through interviewing. So there's Beautiful. Your tactic.
There you go. Beautiful. And I know that some of these things, like my piece of advice for everybody that's listening today, would be that whenever you hear something that seems like the right thing to do, but something inside of you just wants to push it away, I would highlight that piece of advice. It's usually where the area of growth is, right? It's like the thing deep down you should be doing, but for whatever reason it's uncomfortable. That discomfort is the signal that there's potential for growth there. So, All right, I love that tip from you, Erin. Alex, you're in a space, and you've been both running a business in the agency space as well as giving a lot of people advice and helping agencies do outbound emails. It's a very crowded space. Like, it's just insanely crowded and sometimes very hard to differentiate, right? As one of those people that gets hundreds of emails from agencies every day, how do you differentiate yourself, when you're trying to reach a decision maker? What are some of the basic rules that everybody could use today, especially when they feel like they're in a crowded space and they're going under because of all the noise level that's been created around them from the competitors?
Sure. And nailing a niche, is important. I'm just going to say the word niche as many times as possible.
I'm going to start with that advice before any other thing we're saying.
Well, no, because the problem is, so I heard so many times nail a niche before we ended up doing it, and I put it off for so long. But as soon as we decided to only focus on digital agencies with our cold email, only selling to other digital agencies, that was when we actually took off. We closed something like 400,000 in MRR just in, or ARR in just 1 month doing that. So it was really just picking that. What are the easiest way I found to actually find that niche is to look at your past customers. Because that's something we really pitch our agency clients as well, right? Look at who your case studies are, who your most successful customers are, and then just try to clone them, right? A lot of our customers are getting 70, 80% of their leads from inbound, which is great, right? It means that they're doing well with word of mouth. But if you wanted to break into new verticals, let's say you've one of our clients built an app for a company it was like Chipotle, someone like Chipotle. So we took that and we went out to Qdoba, we went out to Starbucks, and framing that message just around, hey, you run a quick service restaurant. Here's what we've done for other quick service restaurants, and we can develop for your quick service restaurant as well. So that specificity is that's where we get conversions.
Beautiful. So what are some, there's like best practices and timeless advice, but then there's also things that break your heart because you see the mistake being done again and again and again.
Sure.
Let's assume somebody nailed their niche, but then got other things wrong, which is very rare. I'll agree, because a lot of the problems stem from like the root problem of them being too broad, thinking too broadly, or not being very specific. But what are some other things that people that listen to us today could just check in with what they're doing and go, oh shit, yeah, I'm doing this, and I can just stop making that simple to avoid mistake?
Okay, so I get hundreds of agency cold emails as well. The biggest mistake they're making is using any bullet points in the email at all. Hey, we develop iOS, HTML, web dev, and it's like that over and over again. That's mistake number one. Mistake number two, a common mistake, is not checking your data. So you'd be surprised if you get a lot of cold emails, how often people are either calling out the wrong names, or there's extra spaces behind company names, or they're including LLCs, or there's misspellings. So that's number two. Number three is making the script too general. So, when you read a lot of sales content, I know when people are copy pasting scripts, like from both of you guys and from me as well, because I get my own cold emails back to me too. They're very generic, like, hey, I can help your business do X. When instead they should be looking at the business that they're trying to email, breaking those type of businesses into different sections, and then writing specific looking cold emails for those sections. For instance, one of our high ideas email, where it's like, hey, we've got two ideas. So basically the structure of the email is, hey, I just talked to the CMO at another quick service restaurant, and we talked about these two issues. Is this something that you're dealing with? And then it's like, one, the app has a high download rate, but it's got low ratings. The solution we found is doing, intensive QA testing. And then number two is, hey, the application, people will open it once, but they won't open it again. The solution we found is using push notifications to drive them in again. So those are two specific recommendations that seem very custom to somebody in the quick service business, but it's also something you could send to, let's say, 150 contacts in that industry.
Sweet. Erin, anything that drives you crazy, a mistake that you see again and again and seems like something people could easily avoid?
Yeah. We're not getting the response rate we want, so we're going to send more emails. We sent 500 emails and we only got 5 responses, so let's send 1,500 of the same email. What we're doing isn't working, so let's do more of it. It's the old and predictable revenue was, my salespeople aren't hitting quota, so let's hire more salespeople. Right, like I said, versus going back and trying to understand the root issue. And a lot of that comes from either impatience or busyness. When we're in a rush where you're like, we have to get appointments now. We can't stop to try to fix the emails. We got to just send more emails. And it just doesn't work. So it's a tough balancing act for companies, but that's the problem. In other words, they're not slowing down to try to really fix the root issue or even find out what it is before you ramp up again. Right. So in other words, it's just slow down so you can speed up later.
Yeah, beautiful. Patience. I think in a world where everybody just wants the hack, the shortcut, like let's get the result immediately, no matter how, it's very hard to cultivate some patience, right? And to be like, let's slow down at the beginning, get it right. And once we're sure we have something that's worth scaling and that is truly scalable, let's, put some fuel to the fire and let's go. But companies just want to go, right? There's no foundation. They just want to build the 400-store building without having the appropriate amount of time setting in the foundation that can support that kind of scalability.
Yep. And one example too is I think a lot of companies, when you to outbound, like inbound, it probably is at least like a 6-month process to really get it up and if you start from scratch, up and running. And could it be a little faster? Of course. Could it be a little slower? Yes. So 6 months is probably a fair amount of time. Again, inbound, outbound, any kind of significant project is probably in that range as a minimum. You're going to build a customer success team. You know, you can put someone in the job tomorrow. Doesn't mean you're going to have it all turned and working. So I think, especially with outbound, there are a lot of companies that say, yeah, I get it. Like the first year, 6 to 12 months is like a building year, especially when you're hiring your own team, right? Which is really your long-term solution. If you have someone else doing it for you as an outsourced solution, that can be great to get started. It might be a great solution longer term. If you're a small company, you just don't feel comfortable managing people. Most companies, especially in the B2B space, and if you have investors for sure, your long-term solution is your own team. It's an investment. It takes time. You might get some results faster. You may not. It doesn't mean anything. So that first year is like a building year. And even at Salesforce, the first year we had $1 million in revenue, which was closed, which was great. It's more than a lot of companies do. But the second year we did 7 in bookings, right? So in 1 to 7 to 20. So again, it's okay to have like a flat first year if you're putting the right people, systems, and things in place so you can blow it out the next year.
One of the reasons for that, I think, is there's so much that can go wrong when it comes to outbound. Right? If your landing page doesn't look right, even if your email signature doesn't look right, if your offer is wrong, like especially, I know, Erin, you work with a lot of agencies as well. If they're not willing to take projects that are under a certain threshold, that'll slow them down considerably. If they don't have an initial offer that's doable, that's not like a 7 or 8 month commitment from the customer, that can slow things down. Like there's so many issues that can go wrong.
Yeah, we say there's like 1,000 little things you got to dial in to get it to be, working well. And it's a lot of details and a lot of things to get it nailed in. So it takes time.
It takes time. This is, people might realize a common theme. The advice that we give seems right and timeless, but not pleasant necessarily. Like it's what I always like to say, it's like the broccoli or workout advice to somebody that's overweight and wants to lose it. Like just move your body and eat healthy stuff. The reason people don't want to, the reason that many people are looking for other ways to lose weight and why there's massive industries and thousands of books and diets and workout schemes is that people look at the obvious solution and they go, yeah, but I don't like that.
I want something faster, easier. Yeah.
I want something I want to do. I don't like to eat broccoli and I don't want to move my body. So give me a solution that's convenient. I had this experience just recently with a family member that shall remain nameless that put on some weight and wanted to lose that weight. We went to the gym together and within 5 to 10 minutes on the elliptical, the person stopped. And I was like, what are you doing? And they were like, well, I started sweating. I don't like sweating. So this is when I stopped the workout. And I was like,
5 minutes is better than 0.
That's true.
Yes.
See, this is spoken like a much more patient dad than I am. You can tell the wisdom.
Yeah. Baby steps.
But getting used to sweating might be a good idea if you want to lose weight. I don't know.
Well, maybe there's a pill I could take to stop the sweating so I can work out. I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say actually something that we don't understand the full impact of are how long it can take us and the steps it needs to change habits, right? Baby steps. It's all baby steps. Because we all have places where we can make changes easily, but we all have places where it's hard. Change is easy to talk about, hard to do. So
yeah, sometimes
baby steps.
Yeah, I'll tell people to send 150 cold emails, right? I'm like, how many emails is the right amount to test, in a week? I'll say 150, and almost 100% of the time they'll come back to me and say, oh, I didn't send any. So my next assignment is send 1. Like try to send 1 or 2, right? It's better to be a guy who's making progress than a guy who is, not hitting his number at all.
Or overwhelmed, yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit because we got an anonymous question. And for all of you, again, for everybody who joined a little bit later, there's a Q&A button in the webinar. You can push that button, ask your questions. We'll get to all of them. We'll try our best in the webinar. So if you use chat to ask questions, we will not look at that. We'll miss that. Use the Q&A section of Zoom to ask your questions. So one of the questions was actually related to this. Somebody saying, hey, guys, I know I should be doing I know I should be prospecting. I know I should be sending these emails. I know I should probably do some cold calls. I need to start reaching out proactively to try to get my revenue numbers up, but I just can't get started. I just can't get, I am so nervous. I feel afraid of rejection. So I can't get into the, the discipline of actually doing it. And it's been on my mind for a really long time. What can I do to break through that internal blockage and start doing prospecting and start doing outbound sales?
So the most luck I've found is drinking a bunch of coffee and just forcing 20, 30 emails. Even if you don't have an email template, try to think of it like if you're approaching and just write the emails manually. Like, don't worry about scripts. Don't worry about anything. Go on LinkedIn, identify a few targets and just start emailing them.
Yeah, probably a bunch of coffee or a bunch of beer.
Yeah, I mean, beer I think leads to typos, so you might want to mix the two.
Better don't worry, be crappy.
Yeah. Beer can also lead to bravery. So
yeah. So that's one approach. Another would be, there's a lot of, whether it's books, blogs I don't follow as much in a sense of like, but I know at least the way I think about sales is, looking at sales as a life skill, right? If you don't know how to sell yourself an idea or product, you're just not going to accomplish anything in life. So approaching sales as something valuable to learn and to do. And part of sales is, people think about closing, blah, blah, blah. But the mentality of selling and the mentality of entrepreneurship really should be, hey, I'm going to make things happen. I'm not going to just wait for the phone to ring. I'm going to make things happen. Now, up until now, maybe that was writing a blog. But you can start, you don't have to start with cold emailing. You could practice on something like, hey, you want to go interview somebody. Right. So you might be trying to find something that's still practicing outreach, but it's not as threatening. It's not as scary as trying to email someone you've never heard of before or who's never heard of you. So, interview series could be one way to start again, or just biting the bullet. Here's another way. Here's what I tend to do. So again, in the From Impossible book, I wrote about these things called forcing functions, because the bottom line is, for me, with a big family, I'm just always hustling, mostly on the family, from 6 or 6:30 in the morning till late at night. There's just always something to do: babies, work, phone call, freaking webinar, then babies, and pick kids up from school. And so I find that unless I block things on the calendar, it just doesn't happen. So for me, okay, I'm going to do a book. All right, I have a publisher. I'm going to announce a new book is coming out in August. Or making some sort of public declaration, and there's a public deadline, then I have to make it happen. If you can write on your blog or post on Facebook or do something, say, hey, I'm going to cold email 5 people this week. Right. And then that fear of public humiliation helps. And also it focuses you, but it makes it happen. The analogy too would be, if you want to get your friend, Steli, family member, they can join a gym, or they can sign up for a triathlon or marathon and tell all their friends are going to do it. Talk about if that's a forcing function, right? So that's honestly when I'm always tired and my time is so squeezed. What helps focus me are these outside things that have to get done.
Beautiful. I love that.
Burning my bridges.
There you go. Burning the bridges, making social declarations, right? Can be really helpful. Or just people around us have a tremendous amount of influence. So if you know somebody that's really good at prospecting and selling, maybe you should just invite them to your office for one day a week and just see if that rubs off that energy that you're having somebody around you that does the thing you want to do every single day and can push you, inspire you, motivate you, be in your face. The other thing that I'll say as a little super old school sales tip here is sometimes it's hard to feel like you're progressing when you're outcome focused versus process focused. So if you're sending out cold emails and you're not hearing back from people, it might just seem like you're just failing all day long. So instead of focusing on the outcome, just focus on catching or measuring the progress in terms of your input first. So, set the goal to do 5 cold emails a day. Take a piece of paper, put 5 little boxes, 5 times for every day. And every time you send an email, you check off one of these boxes. So you have a visual feedback loop that shows you, I am making progress and I'm going to fill out all these boxes by the end of the week. And I'm going to have done the output or provided the input that gives me a chance to get an output. And then you can start improving those emails or increasing the amount of emails that you're sending. You could even do the same thing with rejection. Instead of measuring how many times you succeed, you just set the goal, I want to be rejected 10 times this week. So let's go out there, let's get from people that they're not interested, hear from people that they're not into it, and check those boxes as a positive reinforcement rather than just focusing on why am I not closing a deal immediately? Why am I not hearing back from people? I'm failing, right? That can be a pretty lonely place to be in. All right, let's attack some of these questions. The Q&A box count is going up, which makes me nervous, but we have 30 minutes to go, so I'll dive right in and start banging out some of these questions with you guys. So a question right directed to you, Alex. Somebody's asking, hey, if I have an agency and I want to get large clients, enterprise level clients, how the hell do I get there? Like, what do I need to do to get large companies' attention? How do I get my foot in the door when I still have a fairly small agency, but I think that I want to work with really large companies?
Sure. So the easiest way I've found is to pick an industry. So don't think of large companies like large companies. Break them down. So if, let's say you're an agency, you have 3 or 4 case studies, and then one of them is like a small restaurant. All right. I love restaurants because everyone's trying to sell to like restaurants, lawyers, especially when they first start an agency. Completely the wrong move. But let's say that's where you are. If you've sold to a local restaurant, then your next step, your next type of client that I would target is a restaurant with multiple chains, right? From there, I would try to target more of a corporate restaurant. But you're not going to get, I don't want to say you're not going to get this, but in my experience, you're not going to get a Starbucks if you've only worked with the local restaurants on the corner. You have to trade up, and you can use cold email to get there.
Sweet. All right. Next question. Next question is about how to actually hire amazing talent and how to do outreach to find that talent. Erin, you've helped a lot of companies build sales teams. If you're at the beginning, you're a founder, what you're doing is kind of working and you're now considering maybe I should invest and actually bring in some more talent and help grow my sales team. What's the best place to look? How do I find that talent? How do I reach out and sell them on the idea of joining my probably still small company?
Yeah, well, let me start with actually probably a really common problem that happens in early stage companies. And this is when basically hiring the first person in sales. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs start a company. It might just be you. There might be 15, 20, 50 of you, whatever. Okay, I'm tired of doing all the sales myself. All right, I'm so done. Or hopefully you're doing the sales yourself. Or maybe you have a co-founder who's doing it. Whatever happens, and you hire a salesperson to help sign deals, and they can't do it and they fail, right, over the next few months. Happens all the time. So at least as an entrepreneur or CEO, what's important is first that you are the one who's been in there doing sales. You're the one who's closing deals, or you're involved in the sale yourself. Because unless you have experience in selling your own customers, well, first, you're not going to be as likely to nail your niche. That's a faster way to nail your niche, talking to customers, even if you're an engineer. Sorry. And the next thing is working in sales and learning how to sell those customers gives you more of that hands-on experience to understand, okay, and you're reading some books and so on. When you're hiring someone in sales, it's not like a guess. You at least have some experience so you can tell when you're talking to a sales hire, do you feel like they know what they're talking about? Do you feel like that you would learn something from them, or are they making things up? The thing about people in sales, if they're also good about selling themselves. So the average tenure for a VP of sales in Silicon Valley, I think it's under a couple of years, or it's like 14 months or 19 months. It's so first do sales yourself, at least 10. Then another way to, like a lower risk way to start building your sales team, is to hire a junior salesperson first, who can take over some of the appointment setting for you, whether you're getting inbound deals, leads, or whether you're doing some prospecting yourself. So this is like the lower risk way, because then they can grow, they can take over. And at some point you can either promote them to close, or if you hire a closer, it's a less risky move because you've got something going in sales. And when the closer comes in, they will have support from the inside person and from you. It's a less risky way to get off the ground. In terms of finding people, it always starts out as the who do you know in your networks, friends of friends. I tend to like, if it's not a position that needs a lot of experience, and some things in sales do, I tend to like people who might have, even if they have less experience, they're very ambitious, they're coachable, they like to learn, they care about money, but it's not the most important thing. They want to contribute. So they want to contribute, they want to grow and learn, but they also want to learn sales, right? So because sales is something where it's not rocket science. It does take experience. You do need to learn, but someone who has great personality potential, who doesn't have experience, will surpass someone with experience very quickly in 6 to 12 months. So that's sort of the filter. There's a link, there's a recruiting process. It's, I'll put it in the chat, predictablerevenue.com/recruiting, that has some, like an interview process and questions on there. But those are a couple of the things I think would be a place for this kind of audience to start with. Thinking about
Beautiful.
recruiting.
So I have a few quick follow-up questions specifically to you, Erin, that are around the predictable revenue framework that a bunch of people here have read and try to implement before we move on with some of the other questions. But one interesting problem is somebody saying, hey, I'm hired to implement predictable revenue, but I'm being said that we can't afford yet to hire anybody. So here I am trying to, have an SDR team, trying to structure things where I don't do all the selling myself. And that's the job I'm given. But at the same time, I cannot hire anybody to do this. So how do I deal with that kind of a challenge as the first sales hire in a startup?
So I think sometimes you might be trying to do too much at that point. So for example, actually someone who's really successful, this guy named Scott at a client in Axia. So this company, they were a little early. They struggled for 6 months. They were wrong people. So people had to leave. Got a great director he was a manager, and he was hired as a manager, but he decided he was going to do the prospecting for the first 2 months to do it himself and to get some systems down. It was a bit of a challenging space with small doctor's offices. So email didn't work, phone, and small deals and so on. So do it yourself for a couple months, get a handle on it. Also learning about the sales org and other, early stage company issues. And after a couple months, then he hired a couple people, right? So again, whether any new VP of sales or sales manager should take on selling at the beginning to get that hands-on experience, right? And in fact, any good hire will be okay with that and understand the value of it. You're going to do the selling or prospecting for some amount of time in the beginning to get something going. If we can hire someone early, great. If we can't hire someone early, be a little bit delayed, and they'll understand why. So sometimes you can't do it all at one time. You got to prioritize, and it's okay to delay the hiring, do it first, so that by the time you hire, you're going to have a sense of what they're going to do, and they'll ramp faster at that point anyway.
Sweet. Hey, Alex, here's a question for you. Milos asks about videos, the effectiveness of personalized videos, 3-minute, does it really move the needle that much? Should it be part of the way that we do email outreach? In the past, a lot of times people like myself have been coaching and teaching people to use just text-only email, no flashy, designy HTML email when trying to reach out to a person. How does that affect when you use a video in an email? Is that just a fad, or is it here to go? Just wondering if you should invest in personalized video in cold email. And Alex, I know, and for those of you who don't, Alex is really big into video as well. So he's very creative. He's doing a lot of video stuff, big YouTube channel. So what are some of the things that you've seen when it comes to cold email outreach and utilizing personalized video in it?
Yeah,
so avoiding spam filters. Yeah, well, I haven't seen a good video in a cold email yet made by somebody that wasn't me. So I would say don't do video at all. No, just stick to text in your cold emails. We've had a few 6-figure deals land by sending them customized videos, but we've had a lot more deals land by sending them just text only cold emails. So if you think you're going to do better by sending videos, at least in our experience, it doesn't really move the needle that much.
Alex, have you seen these kind of the videos where you see the screenshot and it's like a little whiteboard and it says, "Hi, Steli," and you know that they have a software tool, or something similar, where they can just change the name and it says, "Hi, Alex," "Hi, Erin."
And the fact that you see that and you think that, and I see that and I think that, means that your customer is going to know also that it's a bot. more than likely. So in a way, that's going to make them less likely to respond to you, right? Then because if you send a cold email, even if you're sending it to, 10,000 people or whatever, there is the chance that somebody's going to think that that's generic. There's a much lower chance that someone's going to think a robotic video that you fed through a software is going to be custom to them.
Cool.
I do recommend videos. Like if you're stronger on video, putting them on your YouTube channel. Like we still get maybe 40% of our leads from our YouTube channel, and it's just 3 videos a week cranking them out. But we're not emailing videos to people. Not custom videos anyway. Sometimes if we have a customer asking a question, like I just had a customer on Instagram ask me, what question should I ask on a discovery call? It's very easy to just say, do a YouTube search for Alex Berman discovery call. And then when he got back to me and he said, oh, well, it worked really well. We're going to proposal. Now that's a win from video, but I wouldn't use it for cold email.
Sweet. All right. Next question is about getting stuck in a certain department. So here's somebody, Joey, who's trying to sell probably to larger customers. And specifically the IT department is one where oftentimes what happens is that there's some internal excitement, I assume with the champion that Joey got in touch with. They move forward within the organization and eventually it gets into the hands of the IT department. And that's where the black hole of the deals just go into like a zone where nothing is progressing. His question is like, how do you deal with this? There's a certain assumption that maybe the person or the internal champion that's talking to the IT department isn't doing a really good job explaining the product and helping kind of guide and navigate the waters. But how do you deal when you always have like one department that's kind of slowing things down or stopping a deal from progressing?
Well, I think most companies they sell too lower than they can. So as much as you can get higher level buy-in, that moves things along. So like if you're selling, an IT services thing to IT managers, and sometimes that's the right level. If it's like a very simple plugin of some kind, but if you're doing our services projects, how can you sell? Why would the director care? Or if it's not the director, why would the VP care? So if you're whatever level you're comfortable selling at, what would it take to sell to a level higher and get them excited and get them bought in? Because when the next level up, whether that's director from IT manager or VP from director or CEO, it just moves things along and unsticks things. And not being afraid to go in lets you go in higher as well to the company.
Beautiful. Yeah, the thing that I'll add to this is just a lot of times what I realize is that startups, especially smaller businesses, when you work in a very small company, there is not a disconnect between, oftentimes not that big of a disconnect between your individual needs, your team's needs, and the company needs, right? Because it's like 4 people. So we all just work very closely. And we're usually very associated and attached to the overall success of the company. So when I see a lot of times startups go to big companies, the way they pitch is they just pitch, this is going to be good for the entire corporation. This is why IBM should buy our software or Walt Disney should buy our software. But they forget that there's different individuals within that company, different departments that have very, very specific needs and oftentimes, unfortunately, conflicting needs, right? And so when you go in with like one generic pitch and you give it to one person, it's not that surprising that when other stakeholders have a say, they might not be that convinced when they hear that pitch because it doesn't address their concerns or their needs in the end of the day. So learning and realizing what are all the stakeholders, who is my buyer? This comes back to understanding your niche, having customer intimacy and truly understanding who you're selling to and how they buy things. Knowing what are the stakeholders we're selling to? What are these different people and departments? What are their needs? How do they make decisions? How can they influence this deal? And then customizing the pitch and material and the way you deal and navigate through that, especially in large corporations, through all those different stakeholders can make a really big difference. And if you have kind of a lazy one size fits all, here's our pitch and this is why it's good for, the company Walt Disney, you'll find yourself that oftentimes you're going to get stuck in some department because when they look at the deal, they have very specific requirements or things that, make them move or not move forward with something and you're not addressing it at all and because you're completely oblivious to it.
And you're
All right.
thinking, well, when you're thinking enterprise, like what's going to be good for the company Walt Disney anyway, right? Is that the movie division? Is that theme parks? Is that the social media manager within one of the movie divisions? Like where, yeah, like how would something be good for the entire enterprise as well?
Yeah.
So +1 to what you just said.
All right. So with that, the next question, I think I kind of scanned it and saw it pop up in many different versions, but the basic question here is, how do I personalize my outreach at scale, right? At a point where I'm doing this with hundreds of emails or hundreds of prospects every single week. What's the best way for us to personalize that outreach in a way that makes sense? What have you seen, Erin, lately? Like, what do you think is like best practices to personalize outbound outreach?
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic everyone talks about. It's hard for me to say because, the thing is with blogs and marketing, a company has 100 customers or 10 customers, and 9 of them, 8 of them do mediocre, one does a few, some do horribly, and one does really well. So of course they write about the one that does really well. So with personalization, what I've seen is, I haven't seen it work actually. I've seen it work, but not in like a template form. And there's all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of ways people do it. We interviewed a guy named David Mordzinski on our Predictable Revenue podcast who uses LinkedIn and has a whole system around it. One of our clients I'm thinking of, she does, she's like little funny stories and she uses GIFs sometimes with her. She has like a personal style. So ironically, well, I guess by definition, personalization requires personalization by whoever's doing it. So what that means is all of these templates you see out there, they're probably not going to work for you. So a lot of personalization means you sit down and you come up with it yourself. I think that has worked the best. If I step back and say what I've seen work the best with personalization is not trying to copy other people's attempts at personalization, maybe learn from them, but then you sit down and you write your own, come up with your own style, whatever that is, whether it's LinkedIn, email, video, and you do make it personal, right? It's something you care about, you're interested in, and you can make it work that way. Because again, it just doesn't work when you're copying other people's templates and just sticking someone's, resume, filter in there for LinkedIn. Again, one of these answers, it's like you eat your broccoli. Like people are like, oh, that doesn't help. F you. Erin.
Yeah.
Where's my copy paste personalization? Like that sort of defeats the purpose of personalization.
Yeah, where's the pill I can take to have personalization at scale? I like one of the things that you mentioned. You didn't say it that way, but I'll rephrase it that way, which is like, if you have some personality, maybe that's a great way to get to personalization at scale. Just put that personality in an email. And Erin, your emails are a great example of that. For people that are not already on Erin's email list, go to predictablerevenue.com and put your email in there. Because a lot of times, Erin, you'll send out an email and talk about some, upcoming book or event or something business-wise, but then the PS almost always has something about your family because you have a very unique and very interesting life around your family. And it humanizes the entire email, makes me feel like I know you. I've been reading these updates for years now, right? So I'm like, I'm passively part of your journey as a family man, not just as a businessman. It makes all the difference in the world. There's nobody in this space with a family as interesting as yours, right? And I know about it because you share it with people. The other thing that I'll say, that I'll throw out there, I mean, I couldn't double click harder on the please don't copy and paste somebody's template. That's not how you get personalization at scale, right? I mean, you do.
It's kind of funny when you step back and think about it.
You might, but it's not going to work. At the end, why do we want personalization? We want it so that we send better messages that get better responses and lead to better outcomes. We don't just want personalization for personalization's sake. So if you copy and paste something, congrats. You've used a very simple way to personalize, but I doubt you'll get any good results or outcomes out of it. One thing that I'll throw out there that actually is completely disconnected from using a specific tool or even framework is just using empathy as one of the most powerful ways to personalize. Yep. And that means ask yourself, not just what do I want out of this email, but truly ask yourself, who is the person that I'm sending this message to? What does their inbox look like? What does their day look like? what other messages or emails does this person get that are similar to me or from my competitors? And then ask yourself, how can I talk to them as if I realize and truly acknowledge who they are and what their circumstances are? I'll give you a quick example before we move to the next question and hear Alex on this, because this was actually an agency that sent me this email just a few weeks ago. So typically when I get an outsourced dev shop sending me a cold email, and I get tons of them as a CEO of a software company, I ignore all these. I instantly delete them. There's pattern recognition. I open it and I instantly know this is some remote dev shop that wants to sell me engineers, not interested. I got an email just a few weeks ago, and it started with this sentence. It said, Steli, you're probably getting tons of dev shops sending you emails, and you usually delete them all. All I'm asking you to do is to read 3 more sentences before you make that decision today. I read that, and I thought, all right, fair enough.
You nailed me.
Well, I loved the punchline when you send that out to your email list, because the punchline of that was that you still didn't buy from them because you don't need engineers.
Yeah. I still didn't buy from them. So you can personalize. You can send me a really empathetic message, but if I don't have a need for your service, I'm not going to buy at the end of the day, right? There's no way to trick me into buying if I don't want the service or don't need it. Mm-hmm. But
tell them about the nail in its chapter from Impossible.
Well, the key there is, if you're an overseas company and you're trying to develop for software companies, just know that most of them don't need you, right? And if you know that, you either are going to completely have empathy and customize everything, or you're going to pick a different niche. Like there are so many businesses that do need software developers that aren't, Techstars or 500 startups or any of these like funded SaaS companies.
Yeah, know your niche, right? If you send an email to a Silicon Valley startup with lots of revenue or funding, maybe a cold email to sell them your engineers is going to just be too much of an uphill battle, because these types of companies don't have that problem that you're trying to solve.
Right. They'll buy other stuff. They'll for sure buy other things from you. But yeah, development, especially when it's a software company with funding, they're going to try to get as much development in-house as possible.
As they should.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about shortening the sales cycle. Again, here, coming back to selling to large organizations, usually they are not well known for moving quickly, right? Making decisions really quickly. Are there like ways when, small and medium-sized companies and startups are trying to sell these large deals, are there ways and best practices they could utilize to try to shorten the sales cycle a little bit or accelerate the decision-making a little bit so it doesn't take as long as it usually does? Any like best practices you guys have seen?
Yeah, I don't know. I think usually if you sort of have a sales process down, your product is working. We're not talking about some product that's kind of it's beta and you've got like a professional salesperson. The idea of trying to shorten sales cycles, you might be able to a little bit, but it's not really where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. I do think a lot of companies haven't really thought through like their sales process or buying process, and so it's more likely not so much shortening it, but if you're selling to the wrong people, right? Just knowing, it's just knowing, okay, when we're trying to sell to a director or manager, that just doesn't go well. So we need to sell higher. So it's making sure have the right sales cycle rather than, because easy to be trying to sell to the wrong people, the wrong thing, the wrong people. But I usually think trying to shorten, if you're selling to the right people and you have a good product for them, there's not that much you could do with the sales cycle.
The other thing that I found around that is lowering the time commitment. So we sell a year-long package, and we also sell a month review. And we found that the conversion rate on the month review is higher. And then we can use that to, once they've purchased, for the first month, to sell them on a year-long thing. And we found that sales cycle is shorter, but as a business owner, I much prefer them as a year-long, even if it takes another 3 or 4 months to close them.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to this is that charge appropriately, usually a lot more than many startups do, to make that long sales cycle worth it, right? The worst thing that I see is that startups charge way too little. They set the price point really low, and then they try to sell to large organizations. Again, goes back to knowing your niche, knowing your customer. And it takes them forever to close a customer. When they close them, they make so little money. It breaks my heart. And it's worse for me if you sell to an SMB, you make $5K a month. That is much better than if you show me that you sold to a Fortune 500 company making $5K a month. That breaks my heart. Like you have to then explain why it was worth an 18-month sales cycle to make those 5K a month than your competitor that was able to acquire a customer in 3 months, making the same amount of money, right? Just having a big logo is not worth it if that doesn't translate into real money in a profitable way. All right, the next question here is getting your first large customer. Like, how do you close the first enterprise account? You don't have any other enterprise clients to point to for social proof, but you are selling to the enterprise, and let's just assume that that's the right market, the right niche to start with. How do you close that first crucial customer?
Yeah, it's tricky because most enterprises want to see that you have other enterprises as some kind of customer. So what I found, it's usually you got to find an early adopter. So there's early adopters and there's mainstream buyers. And early adopters might be, I don't know, it's like 15% of the market. I don't know, 1 out of 7 people. It's probably less, but let's just pick that. Most of the buyers, especially bigger companies, are mainstream buyers, right? More conservative. Who else are you using? Like de-risk everything because I need to really play it safe. But the early adopters, they're the ones who, you know, you could have a horrible copy and bad demo, but like, you know what? I see what you're doing. I get it. I want to do something with it. Even though you don't have any customers and you don't have a case study and your technology is a little early, but I see the potential, like they see the vision. So that's really, in other words, if you can spot an early adopter, and again, in enterprise, it's probably even less, but what happens is the way you know it is they get it very quickly. They get it very quickly. You don't need to explain it to them multiple times. If you're explaining to them multiple times, like feel like the same thing, and it's just like an uphill battle, it's not going to happen. But when you see someone, and I think once you see them, you realize it, like someone who's going to champion your stuff and they're going to sell it internally for you, then you have a shot.
It's important to find that champion. If you're a little older, you might have connections that you can leverage. One of our consulting clients landed a big car rental company like Hertz, and they were able to get that first shot by saying, hey, by knowing the guy first for a couple of years, like working with him at a past company. And then it was this software solution that helped people get recruited. And they just let them do it at one location. Like it was basically like, hey, let me do this at one location. If it does well, you know, maybe we'll branch out for more. And it did end up doing well at that one location. So yeah, whether he's losing money on that deal or whatever, and he is losing money on that deal, it's worth it to get that first logo like you're talking about.
Sweet. All right. So the last question before we wrap up this webinar today, and there's no chance in hell we would ever get through all of them, but we'll do, number one, we recorded the webinar and we'll send you the link to the recording. And number two, so we might sift through some of those questions and see if we can follow up with you guys to answer them. But the last question I want to ask is, because it comes back to the first piece of advice that you gave, Erin, which is finding your niche, is somebody asking, well, what if I don't know yet what my niche is? I have 3 or 4 industries or niches that I assume could be great for the product that I'm building. What should I do? Should I go after one at a time? Like pick one, reach out, talk to them, figure out if it would work for them or not. And if it doesn't, pick the next one? Or should I do it in parallel? Just reach out to all the 4 kind of verticals, niches of type of customers and try in parallel to discover what's going to be right for me or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just depends on how many resources and time you have. You know, if you had a couple of prospectors, you know, one could do each industry. If you don't, I mean, the bottom line is too, you know, when I was talking with Jason Lemkin ways ago and thinking about this book, and like, you know, to get to your first million or 2, you're usually just like hacking and hustling your way there. So, you know, again, you're trying an industry, you might do a couple, you're just trying stuff and seeing what works. You don't have enough data to be methodical yet, usually. So there's not a right answer. It just depends on if it's just you and you have a few hours a week, you got to pick one area. If you have another person you can do it to, you can do 2. You can divide and conquer in some way. What's important to in niche or niche, if you're from Europe or Canada, it doesn't just mean industry. It really means the type of customer that could be defined by industry. It could be defined by size. It could be defined by also title, by geography. There's so many ways you can define and zone in or laser in on the best customer. Industry is just one way. So don't get too caught up in the vertical or the industry as like the way, the niche. So one more, like in healthcare, how many subcategories of healthcare are there? There's hospitals, there's home managed care, there's insurance. there's probably 50, right? So that's it. But also if they're in by state, there's just so many ways. So it's really sitting down, whiteboard. Not only if you only have 3 customers, okay, what are the commonalities between them? And there's not enough data yet, but what do we think? What's our best guess as to who would be the best, who would need this the most? And then you go after it, and you might need 5 or 10 or 50 customers before you have enough data to say, okay, we have more confidence now. But yeah, just hack or hustle your way to get those next dozen.
Right on. All right, beautiful. Well, Alex and Erin, thank you so much for taking the time and investing in this. It was beautiful. Thanks for everybody for asking so many questions and being engaging. This might not be the last time you see this constellation. We might have to do a follow-up webinar to take some of your questions. But thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful day. And for everybody out there, have a beautiful time eating those greens, working out, doing the fundamental stuff that's going to help you succeed long-term in your career and in your business. That's it from us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Steli.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.